I learned about Gen Zs to give you the best advice on how to work with them. Well, hello. I am 32, which makes me a millennial. And if you're around my age, maybe between 27 and 40, chances are you are the working person like me. And now we're having a younger generation, Gen Zs, actively joining the workforce. Gen Zs are born approximately from 1997 till 2012, which makes them now from 11 to 26. And the older part of this cohort may already work in your team. There are a lot of things that confuse us about Gen Zs. I often hear from people of my age and older that these Gen Zs don't work that hard. They switch jobs too often and don't show any respect to Your Highness hard-working millennial. I found this topic personally very interesting, so I went through a fair share of researchers and materials about Gen Zs and have picked what, in my opinion, is the most interesting and helpful tips on how to work with them. Let's go! Now, before we get to the tips, let me explain you a few important things about Gen Zs. Hey there! Editing me interrupts the video to tell you two important things. First, every time we discuss a theory of generations, we need to remember that it's actually a relatively fresh thing. It has been introduced in 1920s, and before that, even the concept of generations being different from one another didn't exist. And second, when we speak about the factors that formed a certain generation, about the common characteristics of people from generations, we need to remember that these traits will always be secondary, and your individual characteristics as a person would always be more important than a certain traits of your generation. So let's keep this in mind every time we discuss any generation. Now back to the video. Gen Z is the first fully digital native generation. They are exposed to enormous amount of information. They are much more comfortable and knowledgeable with the digital world. Although millennials do think that they're comfortable and knowledgeable with the digital world, but in reality, they're much better at it than us. They are quite independent, meaning that unlike an older generations, they value freedom and flexibility much more, and they often look at the traditional work structures as rather something limiting, not as the rules of the game that cannot be changed. Also, they have grown up in an incredibly culturally diverse society, which makes them more accepting to differences between people. Also, they have a lower sense of authority. I heard so many millennials complaining that Gen Zs are disrespectful, but it looks like Gen Zs genuinely has less rules when it comes to hierarchy in their picture of reality. Finally, they are really purpose-driven. They want their career to be meaningful and purposeful, and they want work that would be aligned with their values. Oh yes, and they also read emotional context much better than we could ever imagine. When millennials trying to learn how to properly express our emotions, these guys are bombarded with emotions from the very young age, which makes them super sensitive to it. And one of the side of it is that they feel if you're not authentic. They feel if you're insincere with them. Now, when we're speaking about working with Gen Zs in our team, as co-workers and managers of Gen Zs, we need to accept that they have a different expectations from their work. They were raised to follow their passions in their career, not just to make a living. So don't be surprised if they're not easily satisfied with just any job, because they want for their work to have meaning and purpose. But here's the trick: the job satisfaction tend to raise with age, and it's highly unlikely that you will have a huge deal of job satisfaction when you just started working. That's why when Gen Zs are on the entry-level jobs, it makes them feel really confused, because this job does not live up with their expectations. But because they're just starting, they simply don't know that it doesn't work like that. That's why, for example, if they found a job that they like and then something goes wrong, they feel extremely disappointed, and this may lead to them actually switching the jobs too often. They also can be upset because at work they experience things that were not present in, school, college, university. For example, sometimes people abuse power in companies, or the company is telling one thing and then doing another. Things like that may negatively impact them much more than it would impact us. So what we can do as managers of Gen Zs is to help them to cope with all these ups and downs of the corporate world. Help them to go through this phase of starting out. To help them out here, we can be honest and transparent and explain them how can you grow and improve in your careers. A certain percentage of a boring tasks or an office politics is just a part of life. Basically, do an expectations management. We as managers need to listen to them, to understand what do they like about the job, what they don't. Explain them how company works, what are the best growing opportunities, how different career tracks may look like. Give them a realistic picture, and just knowing that it's a continuous journey already makes them feel much better. And it would be easier for them to handle some of the difficult parts of the job. Now, I already mentioned the value of authenticity with Gen Zs and how sensitive they are when you are insincere with them. And if you work with Gen Zs, it's always a good idea to show who you really are, what are your values, what do you stand for. It's just the way it is. They won't respect you just because of your title. They want their managers to be an inspirational role model for them, someone to look up to, not as a person in a role, but as an individual. And it demands from us as managers showing our values, showing what we believe in, what we stand for. A lot of the Gen Zs, when growing up, were treated by their parents as someone who has a unique purpose in life. So if you're a manager of Gen Z and you are able to act a little bit like a mentor to them, it will give them an incredible motivational boost, which will lead to great results. Also, look for ways to empower Gen Zs as individuals. What we often do as a managers, if you're having someone in the team who is just a beginner, is we usually give directions to allow a person to learn. But in the case of Gen Zs, we also need to learn how to give them a little bit more control, a little bit more autonomy. They're often used to having a lot of flexibility and a chance to do things their own way. To get the best results, let them be, at least partially, a part of the decision of what should be done or how it should be done. Side note, a really good idea, not only if you work with Gen Zs. Finally, your organization should walk the talk. Gen Zs grew up with the brands that were always vocal about their values. And again, they spot in authenticity very easily. Elizabeth here says that the key is to have an open communication with your employees to find out what do they truly support, because they expect the company to take a stand in social issues that matters to them. Finally, don't be discouraged if Gen Z member of your team decided to move on. Even following all of these advices, statistics shows that they tend to change jobs quite often. Focus on maximizing the return from their work while they are with you, and increase the chances for them to come back to your company in the future. Finally, I want to say, features of generations are extremely fascinating, but we all need to remember that people are unique. And their uniqueness is primary, and the fact that they are part of this or that generation or social group is secondary. So feel free to use these tips if you're working with Gen Zs, but please, never generalize. People are different and they deserve to be treated as unique individuals, not as just another person from the Generation Z. Tell me what you think about it in the comments, and thank you for watching. Bye!